Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey, and you're watching the Technique of the Month from Digital Photo Magazine. Now this month I've got a beautiful lighting effect for you. I've got this great picture on the screen here with fantastic rays of light streaming through the trees, and then these lovely little spots of light on the forest floor. Thing is, neither of those two things actually happened when I pressed the shutter button on the camera. It was quite flat lighting, in fact. So they're going to be created inside of Photoshop or Photoshop elements that I'm using here. So where do I begin? Well, we've got some custom brushes that are going to help you make this effect really quickly and really simply. First of all, you've got to get them into your version of Photoshop or Elements. So let's close this image down because you want to start like this. Nothing on screen, completely blank, no images open whatsoever. The brushes you'll find along with the images I'm using supplied with this month's magazine, and the first thing you need to do is just download them and save them to your hard drive. Once you've done that, you can then simply click on the brushes from wherever you've saved them and drag them over and drop them here in the middle of either Photoshop or Elements. Notice the word copy. And I can do this from Explorer or Finder or even Bridge inside of Photoshop if I wanted to, and that will just copy the images straight into the software. That's it. You've done the hardest part of the job. You've loaded in the custom brushes. Now we can check they're there. I'm just going to click on the brush tool, go to the brush options, which are at the bottom of the screen in Elements and at the top in Photoshop. I'm just going to come to my brush list here, and if we just sort of have a little look, these are all the default brushes, the standard ones. If I keep going right to the end, yep, there we go, we've got some brand new ones. These aren't standard, these are the ones I've just loaded in. We've got some light rays, and we also have some spots of light as well. So there's two different types of brushes for two different effects. Now if for some reason they don't load in, simply come to this little button in the top corner and choose to load the brushes, and then you can just manually navigate to wherever you saved them and load them in that way. Okay, so let's actually get a picture on screen and do some editing. So I'm going to use this one, which again is supplied with this month's magazine. I'll just tidy away the brushes, we'll come back to those. So to make this work, we need to have a picture with a certain characteristic. And the characteristic is the actual light in the current scene, because rays of light are seen against dark backgrounds. Pretty obviously, light rays against a light background, you're not going to see them. So we've got to make sure we have a picture with a reasonably dark background, and then we're going to make it darker. So I'm going to do that by going up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Levels. We can give this a name. Let's call it Dark. There we go. And I'm just going to come down to the middle slider here and move it to the right, and that's going to make the picture darker. Now you can see I can have quite a big impact here. I don't want to go that much because my picture that I'm using is already fairly dark in the background. If you're using your own picture, and hopefully you are, then you may need to adjust these settings to something different to what I'm using. But something like that looks pretty good. It's fairly dark. Yep, that'll do for me. And then I'm just going to click on the little cross to close this box down because it's a floating box. Okay, so that's fine, but it's a little bit too dark down on our model here. So to get that right, I'm going to get a paintbrush and I'm going to come down to my tool options, and you might think I'm going to dive straight in with these custom brushes. No, we'll come back to those. I'm just going to find a large standard one. Here we go, the 300 will work nicely. In fact, I want it even larger than that, so let's change the size up to about 1500. I'm just going to paint, but when I paint, nothing happens. So what's going on here? Well, I'm painting on an adjustment layer, and adjustment layers come as standard with layer masks. And my layer mask by default is white. If I want to change something, I need to paint the opposite color. So if I flip my color to black, I can paint black, but I don't get black. Black and white on layer masks simply hide or reveal the effect. The effect is to make things darker, white reveals it, black hides it. Okay, so it makes it lighter, the opposite. Okay, and I'm just looking for something like that, where just I've sort of darkened the edges a little bit. Okay, so that's done. So my next step is to go up to Layer, then I'm going to come down to New Adjustment Layer and Levels. Yep, no, this isn't a fault on the recording. I am doing this twice, but this time I'm going to call it light. So we've got a dark layer and a light layer. Now, I need to make the picture lighter. Yeah, I know I've just made it darker, but bear with me, this will become clear in a second, because this is going to be the dappled light on the floor. So to make that happen, I'm going to get the far slider right over here on the right hand side, and we're just going to drag this in. Now, I've got to be careful, I don't want to clip the colours. I've got to avoid doing that, so let's bring it back slightly. But I want to get this as light and as bright as I can, so once I hit about there, I can then move the middle slider and just lighten everything up. Let's move that across so we can see the rest of the shot. There we are. Okay, I don't mind clipping a little bit on the face of the model because it's the forest floor that I'm going to be lightening with this layer. Now the settings, again, this is going to be unique to this image. It'll be different on your own images. Okay, let's close that down. Now, I've got a full white adjustment layer, which means everything I've just done is visible, but I only want small areas to be visible. So I need to flip this layer mask from white to black. And that means going to Filter, Adjustments, and Invert. And that will invert the adjustment layer to black, and it switches it off. Remember, black hides the effect and white reveals it. So the effect is to make things brighter. So having done that, I then need a brush to paint in little spots of light. That's where our custom brushes kick off. So let's go down and find them. Now we've got a few different ones for you to choose from. I'm going to go with number 1. I think that should work quite nicely. That's going to give some nice little spots and dots. But when I come to painting, again, I need to paint the reverse color to the layer mask, otherwise I won't see it happening. So now I need to swap to white because my layer mask is black. And I just click. And when I click, I get little spots and dots of light. See? I'm cutting through the mask, stopping the effect, and revealing the effect, which was to make it brighter. Now, I could, of course, just paint in lots of spots and dots, but I think in this case, I'd like these spots just bigger. Now, I can't make them much bigger. My brush is pretty much at its maximum size, but what I can do is go to Image, Transform, Free Transform. And now I can stretch these out. Now, if you're a Photoshop user, the same thing is found under Edit and Free Transform, or the keyboard shortcut Control-T, Command-T on a Mac. And that just puts some lovely little spots and dots just down there on the forest floor. That's nice. Click on the green tick or press Enter when you're done. Now that's worked well, but it has gone pretty much everywhere, including over the model herself. So I'm going to swap back to a more sensible brush. Let's go find that 300 brush again. Yep, there it is. And we'll get that one. And I'm going to paint with the opposite color to hide those little spots where I don't want them to be. Okay, and I don't really want any on her dress, and maybe a few less on this tree. There you go. And we can just change the effects by putting in little spots and dots like that. Similarly, of course, if it's missed anywhere and you really want somewhere, paint with white and you can add your own spots in. Okay, so we've done the forest floor. Now we're going to do the main bit. We're going to add in the rays of light coming from above. Now for that, I'm going to use a new layer. So let's go to Layer, New, and Layer. I'll give it a name. I'll call it Rays, and I'll click OK. Right, now, which rays am I going to use? Let's just have a little look here. So if I go down to the bottom, I'll find the custom brushes. I think I'm going to use the first one, which has a nice amount of spread of light and is quite a big and bright one. But do try the different effects as well, because they will all look slightly different and will work well on different images. Now, what color do I want my rays of light? Because this is just an ordinary paintbrush. So if I paint with it, it's just a brush. So the choice of colour is important. So light, of course, is white. We all know that. White rays of light. That makes sense. So if I swap my foreground colour to white, now I get some white light. Thing is, I don't want a line of it like that. I only want to click once. So I'm just going to put this sort of in the middle, but at the top, and click once. And that is going to put my little rays of light in there. Now, at the moment, that looks more like a household lamp that's just been switched on. It's not very in keeping with the picture, is it? So I need to make that bigger. That's why I've put it on its own layer. So let's just tidy up the space here a little bit, and then I can use a bit of transform under image, transform, free transform, again, Photoshop, edit, free transform, Control T, Command T on a Mac. I will need to zoom out a little bit, and then I'm just going to just stretch this out. There you go, and you can see as I stretch that out how the look of this picture changes. If I bring my cursor just outside of the bounding box, you'll notice it changes to a slightly bendy arrow. And that means I can rotate the light around. So we can have the light coming in like that, and I can just drag it in a little bit, and something like that. There's so many different ways you can change this. I think that's fine. I'll click on the tick, and then that will sharpen up quite nicely. And we'll fit that back onto the screen. Now, I think that's okay, but it does look just a little bit too bright. And that's fine because we can dull the brightness down by changing the opacity for that layer. So at the moment, the layer is 100% opacity. I'm just going to drop this down. I'm thinking probably somewhere 60 to 50%, something like that. Let's go about there. You can always change it later. That's fine. Okay, another thing I need to do is actually change the color, because when I've dropped the opacity, it's no longer white, it's more grey. And if you think about it, if the rays of light were really coming through the trees, they'd pick up some of that green from the leaves as well. So rather than having white light, I'm now going to change the color. So let's go and do that. I'm going to do it here in Elements under Enhance, Adjust Color, Adjust Hue Saturation. In Photoshop, same thing, different place. Image, adjustments, hue saturation, or once again keyboard shortcut Control U, Command U on a Mac would be perfect. So here I'm going to come and find the little box marked Colorize, put a tick in that, and then drop the lightness down to about -10. Now I don't know if you can see, if I increase the saturation you'll see it clearer. I now have some coloured rays of light, but I don't really want pink. I mean that could work, but not for this shot. So let's just move the hue until we get a sort of a greenish tone, something like that. And then it's just a matter of just juggling the settings until you find a colour that is complementary to the picture. So I'm looking at somewhere around about those sorts of settings. That looks fine. Click OK. Now we could stop here. But if we really want this effect to work, there's just one last thing to do, and that's just to blend these little rays of light in with the trees. Now, normally when I talk about blending layers, I talk about layer blending modes. Not this time. This time, we need to be much more subtle. And the subtlety is going to come by going to Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal All. Now that's going to put another one of those white rectangles next to the layer. Yep, that's another layer mask, and it works just like the adjustment layer masks we've already used, because it is a layer mask. Next, I need to get a paintbrush that isn't shaped like rays of light. So let's go down to my tool options here, and we'll find one. Let's just go and grab that 300 brush again. There it is. Okay, so that's the brush I want to use, and this time I want to hide the effect of the layer, which means painting the opposite colour to its current state. The layer mask is currently white. I paint with black. I'm also going to drop the opacity of the brush down quite low to about 25% so I can build the effect up. So I just want to bring some of these little kind of bits of tree back through just to give this it's almost like a smoky effect. There's little kind of green bits coming through, because you'd find in real life that some places you'd have more, some places you'd have less light. There we go, something like that. That looks pretty good. And we just want to build it up, little spots here and there. Maybe bring a bit back through that trunk. Yeah, that's pretty good. Make the brush bigger. And with the low opacity, the effect is much more gradual. But even so, if it's gone wrong, you can always flip your color over to the opposite, to white, and paint it back in again. Okay, so you can build the effect up by flipping the colors over and just put a little dab here, a little dab there. There we go. That looks nice. And all that does is it just helps to break up that paintbrush and just make this feel just a little bit more natural and realistic. Okay, so there you go. There is the rays of light in. I often find when I'm doing this that I just having added in the rays of light, lose a little bit of contrast. So to get any lost contrast back, and again, this is individual to you and your image, I'm just going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Brightness and Contrast, and I'm just going to increase the contrast and up the brightness a little bit. And I often find that just gives this shot that finer little touch that elevates it and gives it that whole new feeling of looking good. Again, I don't necessarily want to change the contrast on our model. So again, I can paint with the opposite color, and you're getting the hang of this by now. Paint with the opposite to hide the effect of the adjustment layer. I might want to increase the opacity for that brush. There you go. So there it is. There are my rays of light completed. So hopefully you've enjoyed this technique, but what happens if you're using your own images and it's not a shot like this? What if it's perhaps just a more traditional landscape shot? Well, in the Technique of the Month Extra, I'll show you how to use the same brushes and a slight adjustment in the effect to create a shot like this, where you have the source of your sunlight actually in the shot, particularly on landscape shots. Now, if you want to see how this is done, you can go and watch the video for free. Just head over to our website at www.photoanswers.co.uk/extra. There you can register and watch previous episodes as well. I'm Gavin Hoey. Thanks for watching.